last speaker before the conclusion of this conference. So now we will listen to Gertie Dambury. She's a Guadeloupean writer, actress, and stage director. And she shares her time between Guadeloupe in the Caribbean and France in Brittany, beautiful region. And she has been an activist in feminist and anti-racist movements since the 70s in France. And recently, in 2015, she founded with 5 other women the collective Decolonize the Arts, which is one of the only, maybe the only collective acting to denounce racism and discriminations in the cultural sector, both regarding access to jobs, positions, and budgets, but also regarding issues of racial representations within the cultural contents. So Gertie will present for us the history and struggles of this collective, Décoloniser les Arts, and the way they are analyzing the specific problems of racism in the postcolonial situation in the performing arts sector. In particular, discussing the so-called diversity concept and policies and their limits. So thank you very much to be here, Gertie, and I give the floor to you.
That's it. Oh. So I am history. It's because I'm old, so starting to tell about old things. Okay, never mind. Anyhow, I first want to thank you for the invitation, Félix Dupin-Ménard, who called Marine Bachon-Nguyen, who I kind of replace here. Of course, Raquel, who is fantastic to travel around Lisbon and discuss politics. Thank you to Clara, who apparently never rests. And thank you to other people. I don't remember the name because, as I told you, I'm old. But this is an extremely well-organized event. Thank you very much. I must tell you that I wanted to refuse the invitation because our association is going through serious questioning, and the collective bureau has decided to remain silent for a moment, at least until our next General Assembly next year. But since the invitation had more to do with the history of the collective, we decided that I should go. We are experiencing this moment of silence because the recent developments in France require that we analyze more precisely what we want to propose to change our society and what we feel we can do to achieve this goal, though not alone, of course. However, before I start telling you about the collective, there are a few questions that I personally wanted to address concerning the words that are used in the presentation, that were used in the presentation of this panel: North, South, global art institutions, centers, peripheries, non-central cultural systems. I want to question all these words, which I first received as a tacit acceptance of the way places and peoples are designed, as a tacit agreement with the fact that there should be a center, and we therefore assume that there cannot be center without peripheries or margins. Being a person born in Guadeloupe, a French overseas department, and I recently learned through Raquel that the word overseas were not very well seen in Portugal, and I guess that you know why. But I am from a French overseas department situated in the center of the Caribbean, and as such, I have the feeling that I have always experienced the way France has settled us in the peripheries of the center, and consequently, I have examined how we, Guadeloupeans, from the margins of France, have played at being the center in the Caribbean as if we were representing France, reproducing the behavior of the dominant towards our neighbors of the Caribbean. So there are centers in the margins, and some parts of the South can play at being North. However, after a first virtual meeting with Raquel and Felix, we realized that we were all questioning these words. And it is a very interesting thing because the use of this vocabulary is definitely to be questioned and abandoned as soon as possible. It is not easy, for sure. But even if we use them between quotation marks, they forge our way of considering places and peoples. In les entretiens de Bâton Rouge, Édouard Glissant says that we must change our perspective so as to be convinced that every center is the margin of another center, even though this latter doesn't appear to be a center. Dissenter are a way of thinking. That's what Glissant invites us to do when he says that a dissented thought is a thought that questions the legitimacy of extension and expansion, a thought that contributes to install all existing peripheries as centers and all existing centers as peripheries of something else. The fact to consider that people who live in the North have reached an ideal state of development, ideal from a certain point of view, of course, possession, wealth, science, technology. And seeing people living in the so-called South as those who need to reach our state of development is the reason for the rise of all the racist and violent rejecting attitudes that are spreading throughout Europe. This is the dance that nationalists dance in France, and in which the French are more and more involved. But for these nationalists, whatever their skin color may be, inside the country itself, there are people whom they stamp as belonging to the South and who must be expelled. You probably know about the banlieue, which are not the suburbs, but the outskirts of large cities. These are considered to be a South inside the North. We can also add to this notion of South and North, margin and peripheries, the questions of identity, origin, color of skin, since in France, if you're black, even though you were born in a very bourgeois family, you are automatically classified as part of the poor people or member of the working class or of the so-called diversity that hides so many concepts. All these notions are important to understand why the collective Decolonize the Arts was created. Let's tell you more about the birth of the collective. Facts. In March 2015, a certain number of Black and Maghrebi actors, actresses, stage directors, and playwrights learned that the program was about to be presented at La Colline, one of the 5 national theaters in France. This program was especially created for young people who didn't succeed the competitions to access the different national drama schools, such as the Conservatoire National d'Art Dramatique in Paris. Very rapidly, we noticed that there was a way of hiding the question of identity behind social problems, particularly skin color. Let me make this clear. I didn't mean that the color of someone's skin is his or her identity, but we must think from the point of view of those who think so, without sometimes even knowing that they do so. Creating this program was supposed to rely on some good deed based on the knowledge that there were many protests against the fact that a whole portion of French society was missing on the stages and the screens. But it was impossible in France, where racial statistics are forbidden, to state that the absence in question was that of Black people and people of Maghrebi and Asian descent. That this absence was, for example, due to the fact that in the imagination of French directors, a Black person could not be seen as French by the audience. And furthermore, that they themselves, those directors, had problems seeing a Black actor as a person who could play any character. I give you an example. I remember a discussion between Philippe Adrien, a famous stage director in France, La Tempête, in La Cartoucherie de Vincennes, and Dominique Bernard, a Guadeloupean actor. Philippe Adrien wanted him to play Oswald, Goneril's servant, in the tragedy of King Lear. Dominique was discussing the fact that Black actors and actresses were always playing the role of servants. He proposed to play the part of one of the illegitimate sons of King Lear, Edmond or Edgar. To which the stage director answered, "But you are Black. You cannot be King Lear's son." I personally discussed the fact that Dominique himself had spontaneously proposed himself to play an illegitimate son. Maybe he wanted to climb the stairs step by step, which for me is already the symptom of his own inability to propose to be any other main character, for example, the husband of one of the daughters. Why not? However, even him playing the role of an illegitimate son was impossible to imagine for the stage director, who, by the way, was married to a Black woman and unfortunately had to experience the insult done by one of his best stage directors' friends, who refused to cast his son because he was not totally white. Isn't all this incredible? Let's come back to the meeting that presented this next program for the insertion of diversity on the stages. The program, named Premier Acte, had been elaborated by Stanislas Norde, stage director, actor, and director of the Théâtre National de Strasbourg, and Stéphane Braunschweig, director of La Colline, Théâtre National also. The foundation of la SNCF, the National Railway, and Edmond de Rothschild were going to finance the whole program. Everything was already decided and closed. All the people who were invited to this discussion on the stage of La Colline were white. Social media began to buzz on this, and eventually they added a Maghrebi actor and an African actor on the stage. Black women were not an option. Social media continued to buzz, and we decided to invite ourselves to this meeting. This was the beginning of a large movement initiated by 60 actors and actresses, playwrights, and stage he or she directors. The question rose from every part of the room: Why do you speak for us without asking us what we think of the situation? Why do you always intend to put us in ghettos? Have you thought of the real reasons why these young people who went to the same school as the others are unable to succeed in these competitions? Were they born stupid? Or is there something in the school they were in or in your competitions that deny them the right to enter the drama schools? Why don't you tell the truth about your real intentions? Even if these Black, Maghrebi, or Asian-originated actors and actresses receive the training, what sort of roles do you see them in? What of the stories that are written by people from different backgrounds? Does it appear to you that the whole profession must be examined? The place of the writers, stage directors, technicians, actors and actresses, members of the administration, where are they? Which posts do they have? At the time, we had not even talked of the people who do the cleaning and the surveillance in theaters, museums, ministries, and generally speaking, the whole society, and who are mostly Blacks and Maghrebi. Texts were read who had already been written and published and had never received any kind of attention. The meeting was totally hectic. The organizers began to protest. It was unacceptable that we came without any kind of respect for all the people who were on the stage, that we troubled something which was already prepared without any consideration for the young people who had already been selected to participate to the program Premier Act and who were finally granted rights by good-hearted people. After this chaos, our immediate feeling was that we had to take advantage of this rare moment of unity among us to impulse a movement that would put pressure on the deciders to force them take into consideration the questions which were debated there. We created the first collective called Égalité Citoyenne en Acte, which was invited to a common meeting by the Feminist Association, HF, during the theater festival in Avignon. Many different meetings were to take place under the direction of stage director Eva Doumbia. And finally, in November 2015, Eva Doumbia, Marine Bachelot-Nuyen, Karima El-Karaz, Leila Kukerman, Françoise Vergès, and I met in a cafe in Paris, Le Coeur Couronné, in Châtelet-Les to create Decolonize the Art. So, oh, sorry. Now, we should
It looked like
see the foundling mothers.
is someone taking care? Yeah.
It's okay? So we have Leila Kukerman here, Eva Doumbia, Marine Bachelot-Nuyen, Karima El-Karaz, Françoise Vergès, and I. Yeah. And, okay, I'll come back to the others later. I don't want to stay on my face, sorry. Okay, here they are, the princesses. Okay, we had the other important members of Decolonize the Arts at the time were Sandra Sainte-Rose-Franchine, who you see here, the first here, Jalil Leclerc, we'll see him later, Yann Gaël, Fabienne Portin, and Marc Shepson. We had very tense discussions about the words we were going to use or not. These words were intensely discussed. Racisé, racialized, diversity, visible minority. We didn't want to be called visible minority because we distinguish visible minority. Because what does it mean? It is clear that we are called visible minority because we distinguish ourselves on the whiteboard. the white background supposed to be the basis of the society in which we were born and raised. Visible minority or diversity refer to undesired people, personalities, or groups of non-whites in an all-white supposed natural background. The terms part of diversity, resulting of immigration, of the first, of the second, of the third, or the N generation, are used to avoid speaking of color, race, which in fact is back under a camouflage. We knew that racisés would be violently attacked, but we had to insist. The whole discourse was about the importance of diversity. The government, after having created a specific commission to examine the place of women in the cultural institution, mixed the whole thing together, and one person was designated to take care of women and diversity. We were invited to participate to a Collège de la Diversité, which gave nothing at all. Oh yes, they produced a Livre Blanc de la Diversité, which is a white book of diversity, which is truly ironical, though the irony of it was not even seen by the people who produced the document. However, fortunately, we insisted because in 2017, the word racisé was used by members of the Ministry of Culture, Mrs. Françoise Nissen at the time. Also, we were in a meeting with them and we were very careful about the words that we were knowing that we wanted to use and maybe thinking that they would say, oh, no, don't speak of racialized to us. Oh, no, they used the word. So we said, okay, we want at least this first step. We wrote a letter to all the directors of theaters, Centres Dramatiques Nationaux, national scenes, festivals. We sent 400 letters. We got one answer. In this letter, we pointed out discrimination against racialized artists in theater, which we had measured through a study we had done of the programs of national cultural institutions. The figures were appalling. Less than 1% of non-white persons at the head of cultural institutions. And even in the 1%, we had noted that there was an African man born in Burkina Faso who was directing a cultural institution in Martinique, when another African man born in Benin was directing a cultural institution in Guadeloupe. Two French overseas departments where the majority of the population is black. So probably let's put the blacks with the blacks. These two men were the only two directors, racialized directors in France. As for the number of racialized actors on the stage, even though the number seemed to raise to some 30%, it was important to know that there were a majority of Asian people because France was celebrating North Korea that year. So most of the Asian people who were on stage in 2015 were temporarily in France. And the number of people born in France, of African, Caribbean, Maghrebi, or Asian descent was really small. You may read the letter, you can read the letter on our blog on Mediapart. The first public action we had was a protest against Les Molières, a celebration that takes place among plays performed during the preceding year. This is Jalil Leclerc. The awards are supported by the Ministry of Culture and presented at an annual ceremony called the Nuit des Molières, Night of the Molière, in Paris. The awards are given for French productions and performances. The Molière Awards are considered the highest French theater honor, the equivalent to the American Tony Awards, or the British Olivier Award. The Molière were all white that year, and they still are. I'm talking in front now, okay? Saison Blanche au Molière. All this I can show you little by little. Why don't we receive prizes? Not just because people who distribute them are nasty. This is no moral question. It is systemic. There exists a system based on a certain notion of what culture with a big C should be, and that you must possess to enter the world of excellence. But we all know about this, at least concerning the working class. Haven't we read Bourdieu? The notions of popular theater, non-elitist theater, and all these sorts of questions have been debated for years. Think of Jean Villard. But now we must add something else as far as immigrant or young people whose parents were immigrants are concerned. Karima for the Molière. I was born in Guadeloupe. I arrived in France when I was 14. My teachers took me to the theater once or twice a year, and we studied classical plays, Molière, Racine, Corneille. But apart from school, I had no opportunity to go to the theater. I remember that my mother would take me to see one funny play in Creole. It was a disaster. The play was supposed to be funny, it was only caricatural. My mother knew it, and she laughed heartily before telling me when we were out of the theater, "Ça trop couillon" in Creole, which means all this is too stupid. The play is stupid. But I do understand that being far from her people, she desired to hear her language, to see the manners and habits of people of her country on a stage, to laugh in Creole, to thrill maybe, to stoop at stupid things. This play in Creole had absolutely nothing to do with the plays my teachers took me to. There was a gap between what I could have access to with my family and what school and society expected me to know. This takes us back to the program we were talking about at the beginning. Though it is not formally expressed, these young people have to internalize the fact that the culture of their parents, their language, their type of humor, their beliefs, their religion, the particular things they enjoy, their different attitudes to money, to sharing, is not valuable. Once this is understood and accepted, they have to change. They must do everything they can to conform to a precise vision of the world which the theater they will have to perform has chosen to put forth. For example, they must accept to play the naive immigrant who is going to be saved by a white character, reinforcing the vision of the gap between Europeans and, let's say, Africans or Vietnamese. You should see the film La Mort de Danton by Alice Diop. This is remarkable. My mother's interest for the stupid plays in Creole, acted by her people, has taught me something important. She could live moments of happiness, even inside what is stamped stupid. She was not positioning herself against her culture, which I personally did. And this positioning was making me unhappy. I felt ashamed at some part of my culture. And I know that many of us, people who are stamped different, who are so violently exposed on the whiteboard, also experienced and still do experience such feelings. From this on, I had to understand what was considered valuable and what was not, and had to wonder if I wanted to be uncomfortable with my own culture and part of my origin to be accepted in certain circles. Assimilation was at stake. Did I want to assimilate? I chose to follow the path of decolonization. I did have to decolonize my own mind, free myself from the image of me and my culture that was presented to me at every moment. So I didn't start decolonizing with the collective Decolonize the Arts. All the actions I had taken since my younger age were linked to decolonization because I was born and raised in a colonized island, which is still colonized. And I could see and feel the effects of colonization since my younger age. Colonization contains decolonization in itself because it calls for immediate struggle against discriminations, feelings of being minored and depreciated for what you are and not for your actions or your thoughts. In our case in Guadeloupe, we knew we were depreciated and discriminated because we were black. We could see in the middle of our own family the differences that were made between the brownies and the others, as Audre Lorde expresses when she tells us about the way her teacher treated the brownies at school, and we also know that inside her own family, she experienced different treatment from her lighter-skinned sisters. As Guadeloupean, we also knew that this discrimination was linked to our history, the history of slavery. But at the time, the references to slavery were purely emotional, and we didn't have access to the analysis that we, as members of Decolonize the Arts, insisted on transmitting to young people who came to attend our meetings. We had to go further than some plaintive recognition and observation of the injustice we were facing. It came very rapidly. After a few meetings during which young students exposed the incredible number of discriminations they had to face, it became clear that it was necessary to combat the individuality that was sweating from every pore. Tears and despair were present in all our meetings. We were becoming what Jalil Leclerc called the Bureau des Pleurs, Bureau of Tears. Why do we shed tears? Because there are sufferings. But this suffering comes from the fact that you cannot enter the paradise, or more precisely, what is presented to you as the ideal entity in which you can develop, progress, and succeed. Be part of it. Take your share of it. This is the fiction you are invited to believe in. You yearn after a fictitious world, but first you have to understand how and why this fiction was built. People joined us on the basis of their personal experience, failure or guilt. However, the words colonialism and coloniality weren't automatically clear in their mind. This is why we decided to think about a book that would both express the problems we were all facing, but would also propose an analysis and maybe some solution. With the help of the editor Larche, we published the book, Let's Decolonize the Arts, Décolonisons les Arts. We invited 15 artists, whom you can see on the photographs here, to express themselves around a few questions. In the book, there are essays, testimonies, poetry, and many texts, different texts about the body, how your body, your different body is being considered in drama school or on a stage. We also sense that some of us had a political experience and a great deal of understanding of a general and ancient situation. We had read many authors who we had to share with the youth of this country, be they blacks, Maghrebi, Asians, Latins, or whites. This is why we started the Decolonial University, UDLI, Universities of Decolonize the Arts. I think we have, this is the book. I think we have a few, okay, here. We have a few photos of UDLA. We started with a conference given by Françoise Vergès, whom you can see here, about the way slavery has changed Western life. Tobacco, sugar, tea, personal relationships, and how this could be seen in paintings, while at the same time, the violence of slavery was absent from the paintings. It was very educational for the young people to see how Europe proceeds. Wealth has no origin. It is just there, at some people's disposal, and those who produce this wealth are invisible. You understand a great deal of your contemporary life when you dig deep in the ways the arts are the accomplice of power. The following university concentrated on the rereading of Césaire, Fanon, Edouard Said. Then it became decisive to invite other people. These are the universities, you can see the people. The whole reflection could not just be that of some of us. We invited Mehdi Derfoufi, I don't know if his photograph is still there, for example, to speak of cinema and colonialism. Or we invited the women actresses who wrote the book Noir n'est pas mon métier, which I would translate by Being Black is Not a Role, about the way black women are employed in cinema. And we also invited Algerian philosopher Seloua Lust Balbina. But this is Mehdi Derfoufi, but the most important UDLA from my point of view was when we invited the Abenaki filmmaker Kim Obamsawin and the poetess and Inuit community development advisor Maya Cousineau-Molène to come to France. I'm sorry, I'll be too long. There was a dispute taking place in Canada between stage director Robert Lepage and artist of the First Nation. This is how Carly Marga, a Canadian theater critic at the Toronto Star, presents the dispute. She says, in July, a group of Indigenous Canadians published an open letter in the Montreal newspaper Le Devoir, criticizing Lepage and his partners for creating a production about First Nations issues without any Indigenous representation in the cast and little consultation beforehand. With cries of cultural appropriation on one side and artistic freedom of expression on the other, tensions rose to the point of the production's American funders pooling their support and forcing Canada's cancellation. But in early September, Théâtre du Soleil and its storied founder Ariane Mnouchkine announced the play was back on, end of quotation. Ariane Mnouchkine published a long letter to defend freedom of creation. Many journalists called us to ask what we thought of Ariane Mnouchkine's decision to produce Canada. It was about to become a French affair. And what we hated above all was the obvious position of lecturing of the French towards the Canadians. Instead of answering the journalists from our point of view, we thought that the people who were asking to be heard and were not, particularly here in France, were the people of the First Nations. So why not give them a tribune to express themselves? We then invited Kim and Maya, and our December 2018 UDLA was theirs. We engaged our money, since we never received a penny from anyone, apart from our members and people who attended the free universities, but paid an amount to help us if they wished and could. The lesson of this UDLA is the following. No intellectual knowledge could, in this case, take the place of the concerned persons. The long history of silencing experienced by the people of the First Nations was not to be reiterated by us. We had to shut up and listen. Everyone had to shut up and listen. The second important aspect is that this journey enabled them to see the play, which was not to be performed in Canada. And as Carly Marga, the theater critic, states it, she says, the indigenous community argued that their presence in the creation process would have resulted in better art. And this critic, she means herself, can't help but feel that they were right. This is exactly what our guest expressed. In 2019, we had an action about the exhibition, the Modèle Noir, who took place at the Musée d'Orsay from March to July 2019. It was, as far as I remember, the first of a series of universities around the question of the museum called Inviting Our Decolonial Museum, which we never did. And my idea, personally, is let's end with museums, the way they are organized. Meanwhile, the government had changed, and there was absolutely no cultural policy given by Ministry of Culture Frank Riester, and the question of the relations with the institutions was to be discussed. Was it pertinent to try to improve the Ministry of Culture by having continuous meetings with the cabinet of the minister, as we had had at the very first days of our collective, or was it necessary to stop these types of meetings? There was also a confusion on the word institution. There were relations to continue with the local levels of the institution, but the counseling of the national level was not appreciated by a majority of the board. Though the board proposed to have two parallel heads acting on two different levels, the collective was experiencing a clear schism. Then there were meetings about this is Orsay, and the exhibition on the Modèle Noir. And then we had this meeting about the Musée des Colonies, and so on. Now, we come to the end. In 2020, Françoise Vergès, our president, resigned, and we decided that we should not have one president anymore. The hierarchical aspect of the collective was to be changed. We noticed that the type of organization we choose to adopt has direct consequences on the way we progress, both in our way of thinking and in the type of actions we take. Something we had not thought about was how to decolonize the structure of our association. We now have a board of 7 co-presidents: Marine Bachelonienne, Karima Elkaraz, David Bobet, Marina Montmirel, Jadil Leclerc, Leila Kekerman, and I. Eva Doumbia is not co-president, but she participates to our discussions. Some of these persons had left the association for a year or two, but we decided to join our forces again to keep the association, and we decided to take our time, to take a rest, particularly for Marina, Jalil, Leila, and I, who had run the association alone for 2 years. The 4 of us organized the latest action for DLA. It was a huge meeting around the book by Amandine Gay, Une poupée en chocolat, on the question of adoption and how adoption and colonization are linked. We'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Gertie.
Thank you, Gertie, for this wonderful talk. So I would like to make you 2 questions if we have time. So the first one is, since the construction of these categories and of these divisions took place in the frame of the colonial and capitalist system, how could you relate those categories and those divisions according to your perspective with social divisions and class struggle?
You want to speak of capitalism? I'm not sure we have time to do this.
Yeah, I know it's long. Briefly.
19 minutes.
Of course, we have to speak of capitalism, and once you speak of slavery and colonization, naturally now you speak of capitalism. And the there are many, many, many questions that I personally ask, I wonder about. The question of, for example, all our associations or collectives or coordinations and so on and so forth, we are proposing things. We want to change something, but we all are still changing inside the thing, the way it is. And capitalism is absolutely powerful. It has a way of recuperating, taking everything and putting it in its pockets. Okay, and when you think that you have attacked it, really, you just have given it a new tool to go on. And maybe this is something that, for example, we see in France when we say that we had to stop and think. Because, for example, you see this Musée des Colonies, colonial museum, which was built in 1931 during the exhibition, the colonial exhibition of 1931. After we attacked the place and denounced the way it was still organized, it was transformed. It was taken from the Ministry of Colonies, which was its name at the beginning, to, after some time, the Ministry of Immigration. Okay? So I think that they themselves do we don't have to do it for them. They know what they are doing, actually. But anyhow, Mr. Papendiaï, who wrote a book about the condition of black people in France, was chosen as director of this Museum of Immigration and is now the Ministry of Education in France. So this way of, when we say, oh, we want to have more representation in the society, okay? We are taken in a sort of un piège, I don't know, I can't find the word, you see? A trap. A trap, we are trapped. We are trapped in because finally, they are going to nominate people, to give to some people missions, like a mission was given to Achille Mbembe, who is a famous African philosopher, or to, I can't find his name, but about the restitution of the statues of the arts, African arts in Benin, for example. They find people to play this role, and the people want to do this because they think they are going to change something, but finally nothing is changed, actually. It still goes on. And the thing is that we must go deeper in our questioning of what this country is based, what our countries are based on, what do we take part to without even knowing that we are taking part to it, what we are, we make things deeper and more and stronger without even knowing that we do it. And if our cultural directors or stage directors, whatever color they are, do not understand that they are being part of all this system, and even if they have beautiful sentences about capitalism and humanism and we are all brothers and sisters and things like this, if they don't change something or go further, we're not going to get out of this. Never. I'm not optimistic about this, actually. Did I answer your question? Sorry.
Thank you. Maybe we'll take a few questions from the audience. I see a question there. And I will ask you a question later.
Thank you so much. I'm here. My name is Corina. I'm from Romania. Thank you very much for your talk. My question is a bit off track, maybe. I hope I will not turn the conversation too much. But I'm just curious, what is your relationship and how, what kind of dialogue do you have with younger women? If you work with young women, and especially if in this dialogue you feel a different relationship, or what is this relationship, is especially with political positions.
You spoke of younger women?
Yeah, in general, like if you have this generational dialogue, if you see any tensions, any differences, yes.
For example, I can lend you for a few minutes this book, which is about transmission. It's a review created by young feminists about the question of transmission, and of course, me being the mommy of the feminist movement. How do you say mommy? The mummy, not the mother, but the old thing, the African mummy. I say I'm the mummy of the Afrofeminist movement. So they always call me to say, "Mummy, come and tell us about what you did in the 70s." And I do it naturally. I love doing it. And so they in this book, they asked, in this review about the transmission, they asked me once more to speak of the coordination of black women, to which I participated in the 1970s. You were not born. And for me, it's very important to be in relation with them, not just for me, but for all of us in Decolonize the Arts. I don't want to speak of myself, because we are a collective, and we still are a collective. Marina Momirel, whom maybe is on a photo, but I think I didn't show all the photos. And oh yes, she's there. She's on the statue here. Marina Momirel is an Afrofeminist, a young Afrofeminist, and we work together. She played in my latest play, La Radio des Bonnes Nouvelles, which is a feminist play about which gives back, tells back about the story of people, black women who were forgotten along the way. Not only black, but also Louise Michel or Théroigne de Méricourt, who was a revolutionary during the French Revolution, and nobody speaks of her. And Marina today organizes with a whole bunch of young women a black festival, a festival of black women cinema. So it is very. We have things to tell them about what we did before, but we don't necessarily have to teach them because they know many things that we don't know on their daily life today, and they are fighting on different scales which we didn't fight on. For example, lesbianism or gender or things like this, which we didn't fight for. Not we didn't fight for, but they were not on our agenda in the 1970s. So we learn a lot from them. They learn some little things from us, and we work together. We walk together. For example, the group Moissy, which was attacked in France because they organized meetings, non-mixed, between black women, and of course this was hell in France when they announced. It was just one moment during 3 days meetings, but it was unacceptable. That's it. Did I answer your question? Thank you. So you may see if you speak French, of course.
Does anyone have a question? Yes, Juliana?
Thank you. So first of all, thank you very much for your beautiful speech. It was really, really inspiring, and there are many things that were resonating in me and then creating some thoughts and reflections. So I have thousands of questions, but I will choose just one because I guess that the time is never enough. But you know, my reflection combining with the question is, you know, about the role of collectives in transformation, in processes that transform, that intends to transform, no, the reality, the context in which we act and we live. And often when you start, no, you start from an incredible urgency, and then you collectivize, socialize this important and underogable urgency. And I think often, no, for a collective, there are a collection of tactics that you need more than strategies, because you really need to take open the horizon for conquering positions, for understanding the context, and so on. Especially when you perform in the cultural field, in the art field, there are more other complexities and specificities. So if you can share with us some of the tactics that you were using, which were, you know, also the needs, how you were designing them, even if empirically together with the people, for reaching then also the point to have, let's say, a shared direction, no, in a way, and a shared dimension, which is also an incredible, I think, achievement in terms of decolonizing an internal governance system, no? So thank you again, really, thank you.
I will tell you rapidly about what the way I now consider being in the theater field. For example, this type of exchange is something that I think we should, I don't do anymore. Not because I don't want to exchange, but because there is this position, me being in a position and you being in a position. And in theater, I have the same feeling. That's something that I just can't stand anymore, is the fact that the audience has no right to speak. So you are at the theater and you're silent for 1 hour, 2 hours, sometimes now 6 hours, because some extraordinary stage director thinks that he has 6 hours speaking to impose on you. So you have, for 6 hours, you have nothing to say and you just shut up. Okay, so one day I said, okay, I want to change something about this, because whenever I try to have a play, I say, my companion, he's very nice. In the middle of the night, I say, I have to distract the theater. I have to distract the theater. And he says, well, if you can, do it. So, so I try to find ways of changing things. For example, we created a concept which is called le Sénat in Creole. The Sénat in Creole was, it still does exist here and there. When I was small, I would ask my mother, where is Daddy? And she would say, he's at the Senate. Okay, there is a Senate in Guadeloupe, really? The Senate is in France. No, he's at the Senate. Okay, and I understood that the Senate was a place, on the central place of the town, men, only men, would gather and speak. What would they speak about? Football, politics, women, maybe, but we couldn't go there. We didn't know what they were talking about. So, but it was extraordinary. We knew that people from whatever background would meet and speak together. So I said, I want to do a cena where the audience would have the right to speak. So we invented this thing, which is theater, literature, and discussion. So we are together. There is no difference between the actors and the audience. We are together, and apart from the fact that we are black, and that in some towns there are no black people, some towns where we go, there are no black people in the audience. So they immediately understand that we are the actors, whatever. We are together, and we choose a theme. For example, next December, on December the 11th, we will be at the Palais de Tokyo. And the theme is contesting the institution. Okay, so we have this theme. And in this theme in mind, we choose texts from the Caribbean literature. And because we don't want to be just French, we choose texts in French, Creole, Spanish, and English. Oh, I forgot English. And English. So we have 4 languages, and texts from people from St. Lucia, Jamaica, Guadeloupe, Martinique, whatever, all the islands, and all the texts are around the idea of contesting the institution. Sometimes it's not in the text, but it is in the text. For example, we have a text by Jamaica Kincaid where a little girl says, my stepmother had a plate and she didn't want me to touch it. And she broke the plate. And what is interesting in the plate is the fact that the plate is in porcelain. Je connais le mot, it doesn't come back. A special porcelain is in porcelain, and that on it there is something which is there is a painting, and this painting is a painting of an English village, an English countryside, and under it it's written paradise. And she breaks the plate. So we're going to read this text. So why is it paradise for this woman, for the stepmother? Why is the young girl attracted by this? Why does she break this plate? Because she hates the stepmother. So there is so many different things in one text, and we can discuss the question of with the audience, and the audience has the right to speak. We have musicians, singers, 2 singers, and an MC, master of ceremony, who directs the discussion and gives everyone the right to speak when they want to speak. And the actors, what I want from them is that they don't wait for the moment it is time for them to tell them their text. So they don't know when they are going to tell their text. And they have to be ready to listen to what the people say, the reactions here and there, and decide that now I'm going to read this text or to tell this poem, because it's precisely, it corresponds precisely to the moment we are living. So we are all alive together. And this is something that I am experiencing, and I'm trying to do different other things, but there is something that I'm trying to do which is completely forbidden in France, which is there is a law against it. We don't have the right to be indigenous or whatever they call us. It is to have a community. As I said, we have, as I said to Ataher, we have difficulties for these people from Asian, Maghrebi, or Black, African, or Caribbean descent to produce their creations. And it's not just having money, it's having time. Because you don't become excellent like this. Genius, we have to think about being a genius. Why are you a genius? Because you had time also to do your work. You had time, you had people to accompany you, you had people to give you the money, you have people to listen to what you do, to give advice on what you did, if it's good, if it's not, if it should be changed, and all this they don't have. So they say, well, there are no creators among you. There are no creators among us because we don't have time to experience our creations. And we bought with my companion who says, if you want to distract the theater, come and go on. He bought an old house, and we are restoring the house and expecting that we will be able to receive all these young creators who have no place to express themselves.
Training
This is how
center.
I decolonize.
Thank you, Gertie. I think we have to finish soon. I just ask you the last question I asked yesterday to other speakers. What would you do first if you become Minister of Culture?
There's absolutely no chance for that.
But yeah, let's imagine it.
No,
No, okay. Oh.
let's destroy the matrix of power.
So you destroy the minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clara will arrive. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was very, very inspiring.